Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you are, and welcome to our monthly NetApp on NetApp partner webinar. Today, we're going to be talking all things microservices and monoliths. We joined today by Amit Vij. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll also have a Q&A session at the end of the formal presentation. And with that, Amit, I will turn it over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Amit. I am a solutions architect for the cloud apps here at NetApp. We are going to be talking about, how we actually took one of our use case, one of our monolithic system, and converted it into microservices-based architecture. And then basically mapping the same functionality using microservices. As Mark said, please feel free to put in your questions in the chat. Here's the agenda for today. I'll be talking about what was our monolithic application, what product we were using. Then I'll talk about what were the drivers for us to do the re-architecture. I will share a few pictures around what our old architecture looked like, what our new architecture is looking like, and then what were our learnings and then recommendations from that initial work that we did. What is our current technology stack look like, and what are we doing next? So with that, let's get started. So basically, I was managing a product, basically one of the enterprise content management platform here at NetApp. We were using Oracle Web Center Content. It had two main features. One was just use it as a document repository. The other was to use it as a true web content management system. And then we had multiple business units integrated. We had HR, we had finance, legal, customer support, and our engineering applications. So it was actually it is still in use, and it is a true multi-tenant environment. The use cases that we took, that we basically started with, were all catering to the NetApp support side. And the ones highlighted in the yellow box, the software downloads, the support communication, the product documentation, and product taxonomy that kind of couples with the product documentation. Those were the few use cases that are coupled with our NetApp support site. And those were the use cases that we started with. We started with a small POC, and then we expanded on to bigger solutions. We still use this system. It is still in use mainly for the document management system, because the product itself is in use. It is still in the life cycle from an Oracle standpoint. And there are just a lot of documents that we have that we use as a digital repository for our DMS use cases, which is our engineering document repository, finance, and DHR. So I want to talk about what drove us to do the re-architecture, right? So there were a few challenges that we were facing. One was that the version of Web Center Content that we were on, that was coming to end of life. We were on an 11G version, and Oracle had already moved on to 12C. So at some point we had to move. So we had to invest, we had to put in time, money, and that is the time when we were looking at what else could we do. There was a library provided in the 11G version called SSXA, Site Studio for External Applications. That was going to be obsolete in 12C, and which meant that wherever we were using that technology in the library, we had to look for alternates, and all of those alternates would require some assessment time. Basically, there was money out of the pocket that had to be put in to complete the re-architecture. The underlying OS where we were running our platform, that was on Red Hat 6.8, and that was also out of support, and we were actually on extended support. And then Web Center itself being a slightly niche technology, it uses its own scripting language called IDOC. So when we were looking for the re-architecture and we were looking for resources, we were finding it really hard to find the resources. So those were the challenges that we were facing. On the other side, there was another engineering effort going on our infrastructure side, where our infrastructure team was setting up our own cloud, basically a cloud ops platform with a pipeline that would take care of your CI/CD, your security, your Kubernetes clustering, and things like that. So we have that platform now. It was there back then also. It is continuously getting evolved. We call that platform Cloud One. So there was that work that was happening on the DevOps side on that platform. So that was one of the drivers that, hey, something exciting is going on. We should piggyback on that. We had also released an in-house web app development framework called Cobra, which basically stands for Cloud One, which was a platform, and then Cloud One-based resilient applications. So applications running on top of Cloud One. There was rework that was already happening on NetApp support side. And because our applications integrated tightly with them, there was that positive reception from the stakeholders that we could do something different. And then we had done a small POC around integrating with NSS on the newer architecture. So again, there were some challenges we were facing. There were some positive things that were happening. We took that as an opportunity and we did it. And again, whatever we are talking today is something that we have already implemented. It is live in production for a few years now. So, we have successfully proven that. Again, just talking a little bit about, how the two architectures look like. So on the left, we have our older stack, which was on the Oracle Web Center content. We had a single repository, which was catering to pretty much all of the use cases we had, all of the applications that were running there. And some of the challenges with Monolith is that we'll face, right? So if there is a small change we are making, we have to basically, in terms of restarting our servers, it impacts everything. Although we had architected in a way that there was a minimal disruption, and our releases were all non-disruptive. But there is patching that happens, so the entire stack goes down, and bringing it up takes time because there is a lot of applications that have to come up. So what we did was again, as part of our re-architecture into the microservices, in the first phase, what we did was we basically abstracted some of the core components out, and we basically, instead of building an application on our monolith using that SSXA library, we built on Java Spring Boot microservice. And we introduced the concept of an API gateway, and then we started providing some API REST endpoints. We did not change the repository initially. The metadata and everything was still stored in that repository. But in the subsequent version upgrades or enhancements, and I'm going to show it to you, we basically extracted pretty much everything out. We're talking software download here specifically. That for that particular use case, we also implemented another NetApp on NetApp, NetApp on NetApp story. We have a product called Storage Grid. So all of our software are actually stored on our own Storage Grid. So when as a customer or as a partner or as an end user, you actually download a software that gets downloaded from our own storage grid. So that was also part of our architecture. So this is a slightly expanded view. So on the right-hand side was our older stack, wherein we had the JSP pages, and then we had the ECM, the core content management system, and then we had a file system, and then we had Oracle database. What we did was we took and moved everything left into that microservices architecture. So we introduced the concept of this API gateway. We built a content admin, and then we wrote multiple microservices, one for software downloads, another for product documentation, product taxonomy, and things like that. And then on the left hand was our NSS that was also undergoing that re-architecture. So depending upon what functionality we were, so that's all what we are showing here. But there is a lot more to NSS than just what is being shown here. Thinking anything else that needs to be covered here. Mark, any questions so far on any of this?
Not yet.
Okay. Okay. So, I mean, again, one was that, yeah, we did this, but did it happen overnight? What were our learnings? So again, as I mentioned, we did a very small POC to make sure, we could do it. So some of our learnings were like, we should start small and then expand further on it. I mean, this is exactly what we did. Maybe that's why it's there. But I think just from a learning standpoint, if it was not going to work, then we should fail fast as well. So I think starting small and failing early is important. It's because you are re-architecting, going towards newer technologies. It's good to get support from your stakeholders. Because there was other work happening, so we took that opportunity to kind of piggyback on some of the work that was happening. And of course, I mean, you do a POC. In terms of, some challenges that we faced, there was quite a bit of a learning curve because there was a lot of new technology that was being introduced. We were using JSP, we moved on to Angular. We were using the integration framework provided by Web Center, which was their custom scripting and core Java. We moved on to Spring and Spring Boot. We were using relational database, we moved on to Mongo. So there was a lot of technology that was changing. The advantage that worked for us was that we had full understanding of the functionality and how the Monolith app worked. That may not be the case for every organization and every application. You may have SMEs that are no longer on the company, and but it is really important to understand what functionality is being taken out of that monolith and how would your monolith work, or how would your overall application work, the business functionality work if you break it apart. Because we introduce multiple microservices, every touch point has to be taken as a failure point as well, a potential failure point. So then you need to have a robust error handling and the logging framework. How do you monitor what happens when one service goes rogue? So things like that. You have to think and plan and design accordingly. And then, you have to adapt to changes, both from people mindset standpoint, from process standpoint. You're no longer going on to a backend server and running an AND script. Instead, you are going to a fancy portal and, running your pipelines and doing your deployments and things like that. And then, again, for us, one of the biggest advantage that we had was the work that was happening on our cloud platform, the Cloud One. So a lot of work that they did really helped us achieve what we wanted to achieve. So, collaborating with them and understanding what other teams are doing definitely helps. Okay. This is a slightly old slide, but the intent is still the same. So our current technology stack. So once we moved everything out, what we wanted to from the monolith, our individual applications. So they are basically following, this particular architecture. So we have, as I mentioned, we are using this framework called Cobra. It's an in-house framework where we build our own components, our own services. Then we have this DevOps processes in place, wherein because now it is all in microservices, we can actually incrementally add on to the features and functionality and really work in an agile fashion. Earlier, we were agile only from a timeline standpoint. Okay, something needs to be developed. We have to do it fast. But from a software engineering standpoint, we were really following the waterfall model. And then all of our applications run on our Cloud One infrastructure. These are some of the technologies that we use. We use Angular for our front end, Java Spring Boot for our back end, for our microservices, and then Mongo in the back end. And then, of course, we use Hystrix for circuit breaker. We have Swagger on our Cloud One platform itself. We have Kubernetes cluster for which we use Rancher. We have all sorts of scans and things like that. And then we use our component library called Lucy. That's also an NetApp built UI component library. We have a CLI for our applications. We use SSO, OAuth, and things like that. So, what else are we doing? So, HIP stands for Hybrid Integration Platform. So, within the group that I am, we basically have multiple offerings. We have this Cobra offering, but in terms of integration, we have SOA, which is Oracle Fusion. On-prem, we also have OIC, which is Oracle Integration Cloud. And then we have introduced the CIS, which is Cobra Integration Services. Again, what this really is an extension of Cobra on Cloud One, but more catering to some of the integration use cases, integrating with other applications like ERPs of the world and the CRMs of the world. Excuse me. And for this particular framework, CIS, now SOA is already an offering available. There is a set of resources and teams that support that. OIC is something we recently got from Oracle. We are building certain use cases there, more towards proof of concept. And then on CIS, our extension is, so we had microservices, we built that architecture, but we wanted to do something for events and streams. So we introduced an integration bus, which is basically a Kafka. And this Kafka is also our own NetApp offering. We use a product called Instruct Cluster, which is also a NetApp product for our Kafka offering. And then we have also already released one application in production, which is on the CIS architecture. And I will talk a little bit about what this architecture looks like. Okay, maybe I should go to the next one first and then, okay. So on the CIS architecture, what we have is basically we have introduced the concept of producer service and a consumer service. Again, these are microservices. And then within the integration bus, within our Kafka, we have topics And then, the producer will produce events. And then if there are multiple subscribers, they would subscribe to one or more of those events. Now, again, we decoupled the producer and the consumer. Again, this is basically a standard Kafka integration architecture. So if you were using it, the concept would remain the same. Your producer and your consumer would change from a technology standpoint. And in our case, we leveraged our learnings from our previous experience, and we use Spring Boot services here. Again, just an expanded view of our architecture. So we have a producer service which will produce events. Now, again, on the left-hand side is your traditional systems like ERP or CPQ or Salesforce, depending upon what technology or what applications are we integrating. And then on the right-hand side, you have multiple consumers. And one classic use case over here is customer integration. Within NetApp, we have multiple systems. We have a system for support, SAP. We have one for manufacturing, ERP. We have Salesforce. And then we have a system called Customer Master itself. And think from a customer standpoint, if a customer or a prospect is created, that information has to get synced with all the environments. So this particular architecture actually helps us achieve that kind of a cross-referencing, that you have a customer that was created in a system, you produce that as an event to other systems, and those systems will subscribe to it and create the customer in their own systems. Just another expanded view. I guess that's it. That's all what I had, Mark. I hope I wasn't going too fast. And
Not at all.
Okay.
So yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll get you answered.
And again, all of these application examples that I took, they're all already live in production. Again, we are continuously working on expanding this framework, this offering. While I finished a little early, I can talk about what we are doing next. So one thing that we don't have today is an end-to-end testing framework, starting from UI all the way to the backend. So we are evaluating products that can help us do that automated testing. So that's just one example of what we are doing next. I mean, of course, there are other things that we are doing. There is DR work happening that our Cloud One team is driving. So once they come up with it, we'll just tag along with them and work with them. Things like that.
To answer one question in the chat, yes, we'll be sending out the deck after we post this to YouTube, so you'll be able to rewatch and view the deck as well. One question: do you use micro front end?
I don't know. I have to check and get back.
Okay. All right. Well, I believe that is the end of. Oh wait, we do have one. Thoughts around handling large data volumes?
Right. So I think for one of our use case, which really had a very high data volume, we basically introduced this integration bus. Because the data volume was high, we wanted to persist it. And then depending upon the throughput that we wanted to achieve, we basically created one or more consumers consuming the same topic, consuming data from the same topic, and then basically throttling that, funneling it through the downstream applications. And so, yeah, I mean, for large data volumes, what we have used is basically Kafka. And one of the biggest reasons for that was we were integrating with Snowflake, and there were some performance issues that we were seeing when we were invoking the Snowflake APIs because the data set was high. Our system was not able to really process it end to end. So with introducing Kafka, we basically take all the events. It may come in a burst, it may come in a batch. We put it on Kafka, and then from there we process it slowly.
Then one related question, thoughts around complex structures like a nested quote data.
So that is also one of the use case that we have. Again, the structure of the data itself is something that we leave to the functional teams and the business teams to handle it. But if the data set is high, then what we do is, we have done it for one use case, is we ask the source system to send us only the event, and then we will query the system back to get that data, so that we don't get, let's say, 5,000 records, and they all have, header and line like of structure, and then there are multiple lines. So the payload that comes out becomes very high. So instead, you send us an event, and based on that event is basically some identifier. We can query the system back based on how we are throttling through the solution. We can query the system back to really query the data for a certain set of records.
Very good. Can you expand a bit more on the integration with Cobra, meaning the key capabilities of it that were used, or just a list of the Cobra capabilities?
Sure. So basically what we did was, think of it as, there are multiple teams within NetApp that are implementing some form of an application or a project they're working on. Now, in order for them to work on their project, they'll have to worry about security. They'll have to think about, login and log out. They'll have to just kind of think of, how do I get started? So what we provide as part of Cobra is a set of services. One is the gateway service, another is an authorization service, and the third one is a user service. And then in addition to that, we give them a small content UI and where they can manage their users. Now, this is what the Cobra framework really provides. And what you do is, you start with, you take that framework, and then you work with, for example, in our case, we have Azure as our OAuth provider to get your application created in Azure. And then you basically use your own client specific features into the library. And because you already have a framework ready, what you really do is you create your own applications, and then you leave the routing components to the gateway, the security components to the gateway, the user scope and user security components to the user service, and things like that. And then we have a CLI, Cobra CLI that we provide. That CLI is used to create our custom, Spring Boot services. It takes the base Spring Boot template, and then depending upon what is your backend database, what is your client ID, and things like that, you give that in a model file, and we basically create the corresponding Spring Boot application for you. In addition to that, there are certain shared services that we have. For example, a scheduler service, a mail service. There are two more that we have. Just trying to recollect. So Yeah, I mean, I don't really recall the other two, but for example, mail service, right? So if you have a mail functionality that you want to implement in your application, then all you have to do is just invoke the Cobra service. You don't have to write the mail service itself. So basically, a framework and which handles some shared services and then gives you the security out of the box, login, logout functionality out of the box. Um, yeah, that's what it provides.
Okay. Well, I believe that is the end of questions, unless someone can get one in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 seconds. But beyond that, thank you everyone for joining. Amit, thank you very much. This was wonderful and extremely insightful. And everyone, have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will be back with you next month. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.